A good way to think about the Enneagram is in terms of triads. Triads are three different centers of intelligence, is what the Enneagram world tends to call it. These are different ways that when we run into a stimulus, we perceive that, process it, and respond to it. And simply, there are three triads. Styles 8, 9, and 1 all fit into the first triad called the gut. Styles 2, 3, and 4 fit in the heart triad, and 5, 6, and 7 in the head triad. Now again, these are very different styles and they're very different nuances, but there are some generalities that they share in common in their same triad. And so let's take first of all the head. The head triad, 2, 3, and 4, discerns through truth, and they're driven by fear, okay? And they'll respond with coping it with thinking and planning to ensure their own security. Now, they do this in very different ways to illustrate. A 5 tends to think fear may be out there and they need to go to a safe room, safe chair, safe place. 7, on the other hand, doesn't want to be trapped into pain and fears that and just kind of wants out and will tend to be assertive and to try to step out of any semblance of pain. Whereas a 6, they're just fearful of what's in and out and, more driven by that. So that's an example of the nuances there. But they all do share this common emotion that was so common, it became something that later as adults, they actually could quite doubt that this is what is driving them a lot of the time. Well, the gut triad is discerns through their intuition, through their gut. And they are driven by, usually Enneagram world will say anger, but every once in a while you'll say one's more driven by guilt, which is a little bit more of a core emotion than anger. And they cope by seeking to bring order instinctively. Now they all, again, do this in different ways, but they are therefore instinctive by nature. And that's why they're in this gut triad. And then finally, the heart triad discerns through the feelings. That's a little bit of an overstatement to say they only discern through the feelings, but they primarily discern through the feelings. They're driven by shame, worried of what may not be acceptable or earning approval of others. And so they're building an image to ensure the approval that they're longing for. Now, again, they do this in very different ways. But these key emotions are really, really helpful for you to explore as you study your particular style or someone else's. And it's helpful to remember, when am I being fearful? When am I being driven by anger or shame? And then it's helpful, it's like a temperature gauge on your dashboard that you can realize, hey, I'm running hot right now. I need to stop, I need to open up the hood, and I need to examine what I'm really believing, the engine that is driving me right now. Another way of putting it is with this famous sculpture by Michelangelo called La Pieta, which is in Italy. And it's a really fascinating sculpture if you study it. It is extra biblical, as far as we know. Mary never held her crucified son that was dead at her arms, of course. But it is something that if you really study, really brings up some emotion. And it's good to help study how she responds to emotion. So look at that for a moment. Notice how her head is bowed. Makes sense. Obviously, deep, deep sadness. And yet her hand is open. And some people would say, well, maybe she's just, offering him to the Lord. Well, it could be. She could also be inviting God into communion, into this deep sorrowful, this agonizing event. And inviting him to come into her emotion and more specifically into this reality. And an invitation to take him from death to life, but something she's powerless to do. Another thing is, though, if I was, I'm not, of course, I'm not a mother, but if I was a mother, my crucified son, I was holding in my arms, I don't think I'd be able to sit up straight. Honestly, I think I'd be in the fetal position. But she has her feet planted on the ground, her shoulders are broad, there is a sense of embracing this moment, of embracing the suffering. A lot of times when we deal with fear, shame, or anger or guilt, whatever the key emotions are, we normally take that emotion and respond, take a stimulus and respond to it in our own way. It's often we rely on our own self-survival techniques to respond, when in essence, not all the time. There's a car coming in the street, you need to respond in fear and get out of the street. But sometimes it's good to embrace that emotion and ask God to come in on this. And one of the helpful things I find in the triad is noticing what is that primary emotion that you begin to process things through. And when it comes, to stop and say, I'm going to examine my pain. I'm going to examine my motivations and beliefs. And even more importantly, I'm going to invite God into this moment that feels a little bit like death and ask for Him to bring new life. First of all, assure me of the gospel. Assure me that He has me. Assure me that He loves me. Assure me that He's in control of all things. But also lean on Him in quietness to ask how He wants me to respond to a stimulus so that I would be able to love well. The triads can be very helpful in that way. It's a good place to start.